and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And it's Trans Awareness Week this week that we're in, leading up to the Trans Day of Remembrance next Wednesday, November 20th.
Most of the Trump administration would not like to celebrate that.
No.
But we'll stay aware of it. All right. Well, Trump is wasting no time nominating anti-LGBTQ cabinet members.
But resistant marches have begun against Trump.
RFK Jr. says he will, in his health czar role or whatever he ends up with, says he will fire and then replace 600 employees at the NIH on day one.
Some Democrats are blaming trans issues for their losses.
Well, we can discuss that. More LGBTQ wins across the country and encouraging results statewide in North Carolina and Hawaii.
We mourn the loss of two lesbian pioneers, writer Dorothy Allison and Virginia Carter.
And we just heard about the death of Ted Olson, the conservative lawyer who supported marriage equality and won a big case at the Supreme Court.
The new leader of Botswana once defended an LGBTQ group in court.
And we've also lost Cornelius Baker, a black leader in the fight against AIDS.
And I'm going to review a new play about Catholic persecution of their gay staff.
Amazing. The Pet Shop Boys are honored.
And Billie Eilish and Chappell Roan are leading the LGBTQ Grammy nominees.
Yeah.
And it is Trans Awareness Week, and we will link to an article in The Advocate that just came out, 7 steps for transgender people to prepare for federal crackdowns under Trump, from getting a passport, if only as a valid ID, updating state IDs, maintaining supply of meds, to considering moving. These are the times that try trans souls.
And in case you've forgotten, we have a little piece of video to start your evening off wrong, reminding you of what the incoming former president has to say on this.
Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures, and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers, which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, They will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding. As part of our new credentialing body for teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parent's consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent. No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Under my leadership, this madness will end. Thank you very much.
So not surprisingly, after that discussion, now this is what he said last year, and of course he campaigned on it. In the hours after the election, the LGBTQ youth crisis calls jumped 700%, according to the Trevor Project.
I feel sorry that we subjected you to that.
Yes.
In 3 minutes, which only seemed like a lifetime, he has summed up all his cruelty, all his lies, all his vicious approach to people who are not him.
But we do want to temper it a tiny bit with the fact that the resistance has begun. Lots of progressive groups marched in Manhattan on Saturday. We have a couple of pictures from that demonstration in Manhattan. Had about 5,000 people walking down 6th Avenue from the Trump Hotel. And the message is we won't back down. We're going to protect our families, especially immigrant families. And there were rise and resist people, and trans youth were a big issue, and AIDS activists and peace activists.
Yeah, but this, we'll get to more of this in a second, but this whole debate that's going on, the eating our young kind of, tearing ourselves apart, oh, it's these people's fault or these people's fault, is just very, very discouraging.
Yes.
And has not come up with any productive answers, and certainly not trans issues.
Going forward, it's going to be it's going to be the fault of the people that Trump is putting in place. His health advisor, RFK Jr., as Ann said at the top of the show, is ready to fire 600 employees at NIH and replace them. So good luck in the next pandemic. You're on your own. He launched a website to get you to nominate replacements for a lot of these people.
And he wants to get rid of fluoride in water and get everyone on raw milk. And
then, of course, his deputy chief of staff is going to be the Joseph Goebbels lookalike Stephen Miller, who's a white nationalist.
Trump's deputy chief of staff, not RFK's.
No.
And his one of the names up for Attorney General is this guy, Mike Davis, who is a former clerk for Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch.
Who is the one who is saying, I'm going to drag the bodies of Trump's Democratic enemies through the streets, burn them, and throw them off the wall. Illegally, of course, he said, politically and financially.
Yeah.
And, it's just fascist thuggery is the way they're speaking.
Well, let's keep going down the list of actual appointees that we think we know about already.
Little Marco,
who was vicious in his own right to Trump and then saw where his bread was buttered and turned around and prostrated himself.
And we're going to say what they're not saying in all the other news shows. This guy has a 0 rating from the Human Rights Campaign. He supported the Don't Say Gay law in Florida. He called the Respect for Marriage Act a stupid waste of time. But MAGA is still furious because they wanted the gay right-wing billionaire, Peter Thiel, in the job.
Peter Thiel in the job, not Rick Grinnell?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I said Peter Thiel.
Yeah, you meant his acolyte,
right.
Rick Grinnell. But no, what the the
Grinnell,
news
who had
media
served
is
in the
saying
past
about all these people is,
administration.
well, thank God for Marco Rubio because he's a normal guy. And isn't it amazing that a lot of these people are normal?
No, nothing is normal
He could have done
anymore.
so much worse.
He's putting a
No.
climate change denier, Lee Zeldin, in charge of the EPA, who was dedicated to rolling back regulations so environmental despoilers can make more money. He led the fight against the New York Equal Rights Amendment that we just adopted overwhelmingly
Right.
to protect LGBTQ rights, women's rights, reproductive choice.
Former congressman from Long Island who we've been trying to get rid of for years
Yep.
and finally did, and now he's turning up in this
Yes,
powerful
okay.
position. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, I can hardly get the words out that she is going to be nominated to be the head of Homeland Security.
She has the necessary cruelty. She's the puppy killer. And she was famous for banning gender-affirming care for minors in her state early on.
She was also famous for going to Texas to get dental work done to represent the dentist in Texas as, like an advertising shill.
Congressmember Elise Stefanik, a person of zero principles from upstate New York, went from harsh Trump critic to full MAGA in her climb. She's going to be the U.S. representative to the United Nations, an institution she abhors. She once did vote for the Equality Act in 2019. Only 8 Republicans did back then, but then she voted against it the next time it came up. She voted for the Respect of Marriage Act, as did 46 other Republicans, but don't expect LGBTQ rights to be on her international agenda.
No, and the UN is supposed to be a place where the United States exerts leadership on that issue around the world.
And has.
And she is... we will take bets with anyone who'd like to bet with us that she will not be doing that at the UN as a Trump appointee.
Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor, Republican Congress member from Florida, did vote for the Respect for Marriage Act, supported Trump over his Governor Ron DeSantis. He found a video put out by DeSantis' super PAC, bizarre, hitting Trump when he was president of the United States for defending the gay community after the Pulse nightclub massacre. So it was worse. But he says Trump rightly stood strong with the LGBTQ community. This is ridiculous, but that's his attitude.
And then Mike Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel. Someone was asked, one of our people, or whatever, maybe it was Adam Kinzinger or something, was asked, well, why Mike Huckabee? And he said, because he's a Christian Zionist.
Right.
He's part of that fundamentalist crowd that supports Israel because they think when the rapture comes, the Christians are all going to rise to heaven through Israel.
Israel was expecting a Jew, as usual, to be the ambassador, but I think Trump was upset that American Jews voted 78% for Harris.
Yeah, I mean, he could have found a Jew who supported him,
Of course.
but Mike Huckabee is so much more appealing.
Let's go to the Defense Department, where Fox News host Pete, I can't even say it, Hegseth?
Yes.
His assignment is firing generals who have aided diversity efforts. He does not believe in women in combat. He says diversity inclusion weakens the military. He said...
he's going to fire all the generals who supported it.
He said there aren't, as for women in combat, he said there aren't enough lesbians to man the 82nd Airborne. I mean, just all these offensive, stupid statements.
Well, he's a TV announcer
And a big
on the weekend, as someone pointed out.
Which is when Trump sits there and watches him and loves him. But he says TikTok is turning our kids trans.
I think he's going to have a little trouble in getting confirmed. People are really losing their minds over this guy.
Okay. So, Trump tried to distance himself from Project 2025, 900 pages of vengeance, but now the MAGA allies are like Bannon and everybody are saying, of course that's our agenda.
Well,
and evangelicals such as Lance Walney says Trump's victory is a fulfillment of God's will to usher in a new era of Christian dominion.
We do wonder what's going to happen to Rick Grinnell because he was appointed in the previous Trump administration and is, of course, the Peter Thiel puppet and very popular with the MAGA
As is
crowd.
J.D. Vance, a Peter Thiel puppet.
Exactly.
So Peter Thiel will have power. All right.
And Rick Grinnell will somewhere.
Okay.
And so will Elon Musk. and his daughter, Vivian, who is trans, is so upset at Elon Musk's accession to power that she is leaving the country because she knows what Trump is going to do.
And you've already talked
people.
about the Democrats, like we have pictures of them, Tom Suozzi and Seth Moulton, who were famously going on television and saying all this trans stuff is pandering to the left. Moulton said, I have 2 little girls and I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, but as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Now, they're both sponsors of the Equality Act and they voted for it. You know?
Well, that's not going anywhere now anyway.
Of course.
But Moulton is getting challenged on interviews and keeps doubling down on this. And it's really upsetting and disgusting the way people are picking on trans people as the cause of Trump's victory. It's nonsense.
Even gay Richie Torres of the Bronx, a Congress member, said Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like, now he goes after defund the police and Latinx and things like that. But, you know, nothing from Richie about how the administration total support for the Israeli war on Palestine also alienated a lot of Democrats, too.
And look at the language, just that first 3 minutes from Trump. That's the language they use. And then we're bad for using polite language. Yeah. I don't want to defend what I think is sort of academic language that is tone deaf, but
right.
I mean, the thing that I noticed in particular about that 3 minutes of Trump is how plain spoken he was and how he spoke directly to the people. And, you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez polled her supporters and said, how is it that you voted for me and Trump? How do you rationalize that?
You're both plain spoken.
Well, what they told her was, we feel that you're both for us. And that is what the Democrats failed to convey simply enough, directly enough. I thought Kamala was a pretty attractive candidate, but when you break it down, she was a little distanced and she was not plain spoken and direct enough and needed to be harder hitting with details of what she was doing.
Well, Senate Democrats are rushing to confirm 30 federal judges before they lose power at the end of the year.
Please.
Currently, there are 47 vacancies. God help us all.
Well,
and I don't even believe in God.
And Trump is going to flip all the administration positions in cases at the Supreme Court. There's a big trans care case at the Supreme Court right now, and the Biden administration wrote briefs supporting the care for trans kids, and Trump is just going to flip that immediately.
They'll be against it, but will it go away, the case? The challenge is also from us.
The case will not go away, but the decision will be...
The administration will not defend it.
No, they will go into SCOTUS with a brief that says you should decide against care for trans kids.
And of course, speaking of confirmations, Trump is demanding that the Republicans have elected John Thune as the Senate Majority Leader, they must agree to make recess appointments, which is total dictatorial power. And they've all said that they would do that. I mean, Thune said he would do that while he was in the race. So
now, what's not clear to me is whether he can declare that unilaterally by calling the Senate into recess, or whether there will be a vote that will allow people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Bill Cassidy to vote against that, thereby stopping recess appointments. We have to research that more
of course,
closely.
We're still fighting in the current Congress, 146 members urging the removal of all these anti-LGBTQ things in the appropriations bill. There are 50 anti-LGBTQ provisions in the House bills. There are riders, there are terrible things. We beat
them back in this year, but they're going to come up again now at the end of the year. And
the only power it seemed that we're going to have is the filibuster in the Senate.
Ironic, isn't it? Thank you, Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who prevented the loss of the filibuster. But there is thinking that Trump may want to get rid of the filibuster for his own sake if he's getting any pushback. And
Well, Mitch McConnell said they weren't going to do that.
please, all of these people, all of them,
All
they
right.
lie, they turn on a dime, they switch every 5
All
minutes.
right, a couple of...
Wisconsin update. Tammy Baldwin has sent out a note to her supporters. Yes, except that Hovde, her opponent, is not conceding yet.
Well, and Bob Casey's not conceding. The Democrat is not conceding in Pennsylvania.
Right, but he hasn't, McCormick has not been declared the winner. Tammy was declared
Yes.
the winner, and Hovde is refusing to back down.
McCormick was declared the winner by the AP.
Oh, okay.
All right. But not by everybody.
Yeah.
North Carolina, though Trump won the state, Democrats did not just defeat the self-described black Nazi, Mark Robinson, for governor, with Josh Stein. They defeated the virulently anti-LGBTQ Michelle Morrow for state superintendent of public instruction.
Yep.
We've talked about her. And they also defeated Representative Dan Bishop for attorney general. He was the author of HB 2 that banned trans people back in the day from in restrooms and things like that. So, and these were 2-point races.
Look, all the elections across the country were, in fact, not that far off from the polls. There were a lot of 1% states, 2% states. It really was
it was not a landslide. It was close.
A margin of error election. Now, he ended up being on the right side of that enough that he looks like he had a landslide in the Electoral College, but really.
That's not
and the
not
shocking thing to me is he got about the same number of votes that he got in 2016 and 2020.
And we didn't
a few
show
more.
up.
And Harris had like 10 million fewer votes than Biden.
Because when people are unhappy and they don't like their choices, they don't like Trump, but I don't like her, I'm just not going to vote. That's what happened.
Well, yes, and therefore she had 10 million fewer votes. If she had had the same number of votes that Biden got in 2020, she would have won.
And very important, and we'd like to give you good news, North Carolina Democrats are also poised to break the Republican supermajority in the House there so that Governor Stein's vetoes can be upheld if Democrats stay united. And in Pennsylvania, Democrats held their single vote majority in the House in another state that went for Trump.
But Tim Walz in Minnesota will return as governor there, but he's lost his supermajority in the Minnesota
He had a
legislature.
supermajority?
Maybe
Or maybe
not.
a majority.
Maybe just a majority.
Right.
But not so good. Did we say Ruben Gallego beat
Nope.
Carrie Lake?
Nope.
Thank God. Yes, there's Gallego on the right with Clinton. She is a monster, but she's now 0 for 3, I think, in her recent elections. But, she could end up in the White House, too.
And who else?
Mark Takano won his seat in California.
Reelected?
Yep. And so
Robert
did
Garcia, reelected in Long Beach, California. These are out gay. And
all the out gay members of Congress won their seats, and a couple more were added.
No final count in the Will Rollins second bid for the Palm Springs U.S. House seat, though Ken Calvert has declared victory with 25% of the vote out.
291 LGBT candidates have won their races, according to the Victory Fund, which is a high winning percentage. And there's still 100 races outstanding with LGBTQ candidates.
A self-described queer candidate, Isabel Jurado, has won an L.A. City Council seat.
She's a firecracker. She is, let me find her here. She was a single teen mom. She is out as queer. She was a tenants' rights attorney who won a seat on the city council in L.A. She restored LGBT representation now to the L.A. City Council. She is the daughter of undocumented Filipino parents.
Wow. And then our story of the week, 19-year-old Jackson Lewis has won a school board seat in Utah on the Canyon School Board at the south end of the Salt Lake Valley. Ran on a range of education priorities, but he's out gay. And he talks about in this video why he ran.
And that I want to fight. My name is Jackson Lewis. I'm running for Canyon School Board District 1. I am a 19-year-old, recent graduate of Hillcrest High School. I am a gay man. I was raised in the public education system. The state legislature gave the broad authority to local school school boards to ban books. A personal experience of mine, one of my favorite stories to read, especially when I was coming to terms with who I was the book series Heartstopper. I have unfortunately seen, to my great anger, school boards threaten and take that book off of the shelves. I checked that book out for the first time at Hillcrest High School Public Library. It helped me come to terms with who I was, and not having access to that information is unconscionable, and it's something that I want to make sure never happens to a student in Canyon School District. So what I would say to a young person who's considering running for office, do it. It's tremendously rewarding. Even if you lose, doesn't matter. The experience you'll gain out of it is something you'll never gain in a college, in a classroom. It's something that can only be gained out on the field. And it's worth it, so do it.
Youngest person ever elected to office in Utah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
You can do it. So, all right. Well, we told you how California and Colorado repealed their constitutional amendments against same-sex marriage. And by the way, Colorado, you still need to repeal your law against same-sex marriage.
Yes, if
But anyway,
it's crazy.
But Hawaii has repealed their state constitutional amendment that gave the legislature the right to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples, which they did. And that's a long story, but they've repealed that now, and Hawaii is making progress.
And Sarah McBride, who has been elected to Congress as an out trans woman,
Yes.
From Delaware, got the most statewide votes of any candidate in Delaware. She got more votes than Kamala Harris.
No, highest percentage. Actually, there was an insurance commissioner who got more statewide, but I mean, it's mostly.
Never mind.
No, it's mostly. The point is she beat out Harris in percentage-wise, and the governor and the senator, everybody. That's the point.
Everyone but the insurance commissioner.
Yes.
I stand corrected.
Percentage-wise.
Yeah, okay. All right, where are we now?
Well, let's give them the good
Staten
news.
Island.
Yes.
Yes. If you watch this show, we've been fighting for approximately 150 years to get LGBTQ groups allowed to march in St. Patrick's Day parades.
We were on the protest line for 25 years.
God, I'm so over
You got
it.
arrested.
Many times. So we won in Manhattan, about 5 years ago?
5 or 6 years ago, yeah.
And the last holdout was Staten Island. And now Staten Island's St. Patrick's Day Parade has had a change of administration, and they are now welcoming an out LGBT group, the Staten Island Pride Center, to march.
And I give some credit to our disgraced mayor, Eric Adams, who pushed for an alternate parade on Staten Island last year, and I think it kind of embarrassed them.
Yeah,
of course,
they did the alternate parade, yes.
So the Lavender and Green Alliance and the Pride Center of Staten Island can march, and, Mayor Adams is counting on a pardon from Donald Trump if he gets convicted.
He's working it.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well,
I've lost my place.
We are down. Yes.
Yeah. District of Columbia.
Yes. A beloved gay DJ and hairstylist, Brian Smith, has succumbed to injuries from a beating he took in a robbery 2 weeks ago in D.C. He was leaving a gig at an event called Hellbent at the famed 930 Club. The police are investigating it as a robbery, but very sad to lose him.
Yes, and, who knows what complex motives were behind this, but that's what they're calling it at the moment.
Right.
And an update from Baltimore on the killer of a trans woman there, Megan Riley Lewis. The killer was found guilty of second-degree assault.
Now, she was a 57-year-old trans advocate, very prominent. They died after an altercation. This guy, Brian Dillon, was charged with second-degree murder, first-degree assault, and firearms charges, and all he gets is,
Second-degree assault.
Exactly.
He was a delivery driver, a food delivery driver, and went into the building where she lived. She, for some reason, came out after him, approached his car, and he just...
shot her. Lewis is remembered as someone who did everything for LGBTQ individuals and was one of our strongest advocates. So a great loss. And if you don't think hate is on the rise, a production of The Diary of Anne Frank in mid-Michigan in Howell at the American Legion Post was protested by people waving Nazi flags. And yelling, they don't say this in a lot of the stories, where they're yelling "Heil Hitler" and "Hail Trump." That's what they were yelling.
Charlottesville. And we told you last week, I think, that in Maryland at Salisbury University, a bunch of fraternity guys have been arrested, 12 of them, for sitting around one night at the frat house. Oh, let's entice somebody on Grindr and get him over here and beat him up, which they did. Poor 40-year-old man.
He tried to leave. They kept throwing him to the floor. They broke his rib. They're all on suspension, as is their fraternity, Sigma Alpha Epsilon.
They have been arrested, and this is a picture of a protest by students at the university.
A community vigil and unity walk.
Okay.
All right.
Yes. All right. So a few people we lost this week. Dorothy Allison. Oh, my God. What a giant. What a giant. Bastard Out of Carolina was
her novel,
her first,
1992.
most famous. She died at 75 of cancer. She was a founder of the lesbian sex mafia. Bastard Out of Carolina was made into a TV movie, as was her subsequent book, Cave Dweller.
She was named one of the 136 great American novels, The Bastard Out of Carolina, by Atlantic Magazine in March of this year. But her work focused on class struggle, sexual abuse, child abuse, feminism, and lesbianism. She won several Lambda Literary Awards and was elected to the Fellowship of Southern Writers.
A giant. Let's look at, we have a couple of minutes of her talking. Let's listen to that.
I'm here to talk about Bastard Out of Carolina, which was recently published in the 10th anniversary edition. And I'm in New Orleans at the Tennessee Williams Literary Festival. Bastard Out of Carolina was the first novel that I published, and it took me 10 years to finish writing it. I started it in a series of short stories, and it surprised me when it became a national bestseller and a finalist for the National Book Awards. Truthfully, what I really wanted to do in that novel was essentially two things. I wanted to tell a true story about family violence and incest. True in the sense that it was totally real and accurate to my lived experience, and took people deep inside something they didn't want to know about. And the other thing I wanted to do was put on the page a memorial to the family that I loved, a huge, violent, working class family that had problems with liquor and poverty and generally being thought poorly of. I think the biggest shock I had was I was in a little town in Framingham, Maine, and this big old guy in a painter's outfit, waiting at the back. Didn't know what he was doing in this little high school gymnasium. He's waiting at the back, and after everybody cleared a little bit, he comes up and he leans in and he says it. You told my story. And I told a story about a Southern girl child. And he said, yeah, but you know, they mess up little boys in the North too. And he leaned in and he just put his forehead against my cheek. He didn't try to kiss me or any of that. He just put his forehead to my cheek and gave this sob. It breaks your heart. It just breaks your heart. And then he let go of me and he stepped back and he said, I make my kids read that book so they'll understand.
Wow. Wow.
Amazing.
You know, she credited militant feminists in college for encouraging her to be a writer, and she edited the feminist magazine Amazing Grace in Tallahassee, where she founded a bookstore, a feminist bookstore called Her Store. She published 3 novels that all won so many awards. She called herself a Burlingame Californian, and living with her late partner, Alex Lehman, for 30 years, and their son, Wolf Michael. A French literary scholar called Dorothy Allison's work a celebration of the vilified, transgressive lesbian body.
A really huge loss. And another lesbian feminist who died this week or last week, Virginia Carter, not as well known. She started her career as a physicist. That's her in a lab, I guess. Although she had to really fight for that because she went to college for that, but she was the only one. Not all the men were offered big jobs.
She worked in the aerospace industry, advising, the Air Force. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then,
So she joined Now and
Became the president of the LA chapter.
Yes, got involved in the feminist movement in the early 70s. And then she went to an event where she met Frances Lear, the wife of Norman Lear, creator of All in the Family and Maude and everything else. In fact, there she is on the right with Norman Lear in the center and Betty Ford on the left. So Frances Lear says to her, "Oh, you should meet my husband." Well, she had no idea who Norman Lear was. She wasn't a TV sitcom watcher.
Nor did she want a job through somebody's wife. But,
No.
But he offers her to be an advisor, director of creative affairs, doubled her salary.
Thank God.
So she influenced shows like All in the Family, Maude, Sanford and Son, The Jeffersons, Mary Hartman. Which was the first network sitcom, by the way, with a gay character played by Billy Crystal.
Mary Hartman.
And she said, I can change one sentence
That was so
in a
pleasant.
TV script, and thousands of viewers will receive the impact. So she got to see all the scripts. And she said...
It's an incredible story. She goes from being a physicist for the Air Force and ends up as Norman Lear's right-hand woman on feminist and LGBTQ issues.
Her experience with breast cancer is what led to that famous episode with Edith and All of the Family dealing with a lump in her breast.
Jean Stapleton, according to this, recalled watching Ms. Carter's evolution from physics to sitcoms. She understood there was a lot to learn and that things might be difficult. She took a lot of lip and she handled it well. And she was the liaison to activists for Norman Lear, too.
For family planning. And in 1982, she produced, and I saw this movie, I had no idea she had anything to do with it, First Lady of the World, about Eleanor Roosevelt after FDR died, and she led the fight in the UN for the Universal Charter of Human Rights, played by Stapleton, Jean Stapleton, yes.
She leaves her partner, Judith Osmer, and again, another giant in the world, not as well known as Dorothy Allison, but incredibly important.
Someone with a mixed record was Ted Olson, who just died at the age of 84. He was the lawyer for George Bush in the 2000 election at the Supreme Court, and it got them to give George Bush that election.
Through Florida, the big Florida case.
Yes, but then he took the Prop 8 same-sex marriage case to the Supreme Court with David Boyce there, a Democrat lawyer. And
formally, anyway.
And they basically won.
Well, this was, California had legalized same-sex marriage on its own. Then the legislature passed Prop 8, banning it. And so...
and we got a gay judge to overturn it.
Yes. Well, they wanted to go into court against this. And all the movement, all the major LGBTQ organizations said, don't do it. We'll lose. This will set us back. Do not challenge this law. And these guys said, no, we'll take it on. And they won at the Supreme Court.
Right.
All right. Then we have...
By the way, I'll give you some more encouraging news. I'm just throwing this in. While Harris won New York, there was slippage to Trump, but the Democrats in the Assembly extended their veto-proof majority to 102 votes out of 150.
Well, here's the real good news this week. In Louisiana, a federal judge has blocked the state's mandate for the posting of the 10 Commandments in every school classroom.
But nationwide, women and trans people are stockpiling, respectively, abortion pills and hormones in the wake of the election.
And passports.
An abortion pill finder site said that there was a 625% increase in traffic after the election. And they're worried that they're going to use the Comstock law to stop the, get abortion pills from going through the mails.
Well, now we've come full circle. So let's go to international
And
news.
LGBTQ couples are rushing to get married. So don't wait.
Yeah.
And, okay.
UK. How about that Episcopal Church?
Well, last week we told you Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, came out for same-sex marriage. And that was big news, and he got a lot of pushback on that. But he was already dealing with a crisis that he had not dealt with well, and a report came out on it that there was this lawyer going to Christian youth camps and abusing men and boys sexually, physically, etc. This guy, Mr. Smith, would tell them that the way to Christ was through suffering, and he'd beat them up.
Oh, God.
So he has resigned over this. He was
so the report comes out that Justin Welby, as Archbishop of Canterbury, had not done enough to stop this or report this guy or take care of him. So
to meet with the victims and things like that, or to any of that stuff.
He has now resigned and taken some responsibility for it. A little too late, Justin.
But good news from Botswana in southern Africa. The president-elect is Duma Boko, who once represented the local LGBTQ group, Legabibo, in court in their successful fight for government recognition. He had a landslide victory over the incumbent. Now, Botswana decriminalized homosexuality in 2019, and Boko defeated an incumbent president who also met with gay groups and vowed to protect them. So we do better in southern Africa.
The report is that he won on economic issues, that there's high unemployment there, not unlike this country thinking they were voting on economic issues.
Iraq's ultra-conservative and dominant Shia Muslim parties propose lowering the age of consent from 18 to 9, so old men can marry young children.
Where is that?
Iraq.
God. In Turkey, a local government in Istanbul barred the new movie Queer, starring Daniel Craig, from a film festival put on by Mubi, M-U-B-I, the company. And as a result, Mubi has shut down the entire film festival in protest of the censorship.
There's Daniel
on the left there, believe it or not.
The Russian parliament has advanced a bill to ban adoptions of Russian children by people from countries where gender transition is legal. It would apply to 15 countries, mostly in Europe, but also Australia, Argentina, and Canada. Adoptions in the U.S. were banned in 2012.
Also in Russia, you now can no longer talk about being childless.
And Amnesty International is calling on FIFA to block Saudi Arabia as the World Cup host without major human rights reforms.
But, while the tennis world and the golf world and everybody else are continuing to hold events over there.
I can't watch golf. And Afghanistan congratulated the United States on not electing a woman as our leader. We fought a war over this.
The Daniel Craig movie Queer will be arriving in U.S. theaters on November 27th.
AIDS news?
Yes.
Congratulations, America. Federal assistance under the ACA expires at the end of 2025 under the American Rescue Plan that extended subsidies to the middle class. Trump and the Republicans have already said, do not expect any more subsidies after that. They're going to make things better, but they're just cutting everything.
And, of course, the economy is going to be out of control and inflation is going to be way up. Oh, well is right. Maybe we could impeach him for the third time. Well, a little good news from the CDC. New syphilis infections are down, and this is hypothetically attributed to people using preventive antibiotics, mostly gay men.
Apparently this doxy-pep you take it after you've had an exposure. You think you might have had an exposure.
Okay.
They call it PEP, but you take it right after that, and within 72 hours of condomless sex.
But they're seeing real drops in syphilis infections, and that's good news.
Lower cases of chlamydia and syphilis.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So another person we lost this week was Cornelius Baker, 63 years old. There he is with Tom Viola over his shoulder.
He was a trustee of Broadway Cares for 30 years, and in the early years of the AIDS crisis, he was a confidential assistant to the Assistant Secretary of Health for the National AIDS Program office. This is under Bush 1, and he worked with the National Association of People with AIDS. He was himself a person with AIDS, going from policy director to the executive director. Was the head of the Whitman Walker Clinic in D.C. His resume goes on and on.
State Department, NIH,
yes.
And he was, Tom Viola there credited him with being a political advisor to Broadway Cares, that
Tom said he was a great advocate, champion, and pal, citing his expertise on AIDS politics in Washington. Tom's going to be with us at the end of the year, along with our associate director here, Bill Ballman, producer.
Associate producer, yes.
Producer Bill Ballman.
But
as guests.
let's hear from Cornelius Baker.
Unfortunately, the theater community was one of the first to be hit very hard by the HIV epidemic. And in the early days, I mean, there was absolutely nothing. And people were trying everything to stay alive. You know, and there were, you know, people would read that there was such and such drug that they could get from Mexico, and they were importing everything. And, you know, and I think that for me, I felt that there were two solutions to the epidemic. I mean, well, three. Obviously, we needed to learn what caused it so people could prevent it. But even before we learned the exact virus, we, you know, had strong suspicion that it was sexually transmitted and started encouraging people to use condoms. The second thing was that we needed science. We needed, I mean, if we were ever going to find a cure, we needed clinical research, we needed trials, we needed investment in science, and we needed political leadership. You know, we needed who was going to mobilize the country, and it needed to be elected officials, but it also needed to be community leaders. So it was sort of like we needed a march on dimes. You know, we're going to get rid of it just like polio. There had to be this real mobilization towards it. You know, I left the theater and I went to work first locally in Washington and then nationally working politically. But to be successful working politically, I had to learn the science and what the science was and what needed to be done. Everything from, you know, how we were approaching this. I had been fortunate, my great liberal arts education, my junior year, half the semester was dedicated to the search for the double helix. And so I, as a result, understood retroviruses. And, you know, and I have to say, when you're sitting in Seneca Falls, New York, you know, and this would have been 1980 was my junior year, sitting in Seneca Falls, New York, in sophomore year, I guess, no, sophomore year, reading The Search for the Double Helix and thinking, this has absolutely nothing to do with my dream of being on Broadway. Nothing. But you know, a liberal arts education, you know, makes you hungry to learn the world, and that includes science. And so I found that, which was like a detective story, a great read. But when then HIV came along and when the science was being discussed, clearly I didn't understand it in a way that, you know, someone with a, you know, PhD or other advanced degrees in science would. But I understood the concepts and could translate those to other people in my community. And that was really helpful in getting people to, one, not be as afraid, to be more informed, and to feel more control of their lives, and to begin participating in the science. And, you know, many of us, we volunteered for trials. You know, people who were positive volunteered for treatment trials. People who were negative volunteered for vaccine trials. And, you know, I've been in 4 or 5 trials, you know, since the beginning of the epidemic. And that's been important.
So a great loss, a much honored person. He received the Diego Lopez Award back in 1998 from the National Lesbian and Gay Health Association for his advocacy.
Well, he was everywhere in the epidemic.
Yep.
As we just listed. All right, moving on to entertainment news.
Well, the Pet Shop Boys celebrated their 40th anniversary, and at the MTV Europe Music Awards, and they won the inaugural Pop Pioneers Award and performed a cover of David Bowie's All the Young Dudes, which we will link to the official video of, and they did their classic hit West End Girls.
I love West End Girls. Bill Ballman, our associate producer, is a huge Pet Shop Boys fan and has been filling us in on a lot of things about them, and talks about how important this song was, All the Young Dudes, when it was originally written and performed by Mott the Hoople, written by David Bowie decades ago, and now the Pet Shop Boys have adopted it and redone it and issued it. It's available on YouTube, and as Andy says, we'll link to it on our show note. So we put out a show note once a week.
Yes.
That gives you the headlines and tells you what's going to be on the show that week, and has extra links to things like the Pet Shop Boys video. And so if you want to be on our email list to get that once a week, one email, just go to our website, gayusatv.org, and sign up.
Once a week, unless there's an emergency, which I am expecting more of in the coming years.
Well, I'm not looking forward to the emergencies, but it would be nice to have bulletins.
And we don't hammer this every week, but we mentioned last week that, of course, it's also an opportunity there on our website to donate to Gay USA. And we just mentioned it, and you sent us, we're so gratified by the support that we're getting from you that you want us to keep going, even at our advanced ages.
Because we debate this.
Keep doing this. So we thank you, and you do keep us going. So go to gayusatv.org, and there is an opportunity to get on the email list and to support us.
If you wish.
Now, I saw what I would call a new gem of a play. It's called Communion. Matthew LaBanca's one-man show, there he is, about his ordeal, and we reported on this. He was happily working as a music director at a Catholic school and parish in Queens, New York, when an anonymous hater told the bishop that Matthew had married his male partner. So it takes place in an intimate setting at the Cell Theater, right down the block on West 23rd Street from us.
Who knew that was a theater? I thought it was a sex club.
I had never been in there. It's a theater.
Okay.
LaBanca was already an experienced performer with Broadway credits, but he takes us pretty much treats us like a class or like a choir through his story, his hurt, his outrage, the hypocrisy of his persecutors in the church, the support of his choir and his kids, but also, I give him great credit for this, he reflects on why he didn't speak up sooner, Oh,
I'd like to hear that.
Yes. And it's an entertaining presentation and ultimately a very moving play directed by Kira Smiring. It is running through December 8th.
So what does he say about not having
I'm
spoken?
not giving it away. You got to come see the show.
It's only a few hundred yards. I guess I might be able to make it.
And it's only an hour.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
roughly an hour.
All right, that's good.
Congratulations, Matthew.
All
Because
right.
as a really someone who left the church 100 years ago, I'm reluctant to go. She look at this is how she's talking about me. But no, seriously. I mean, some ways I don't understand people who stick with it. But this was. I met him at an event, and he talked me into it, and I'm so glad he did.
Okay. Well, you might also be glad to attend this year's annual Doc NYC Festival, which is an all documentaries film festival. They always have great stuff, and we're particularly interested this year in the fact that there's a documentary about our friend who you still see in our opening credits, Stacey Ann Chin.
It's called A Mother Apart, about her relationship with her own mother and being a mother.
Yes. She did a one-woman show about that a few years ago that we went to see. And she's one incredible poet, activist, performer. Stacey Ann is amazing. So that's just one documentary at the Doc NYC Festival. Check out their website for
And they've
all
got the Jackie
offerings.
Shane story.
Yep.
It's called Any Other Way, and on November 19th. Now, go to docnyc.net for the full schedule, and after they're shown in the theaters, they make it available to you throughout the country so you can stream them.
And this weekend at their first
Well,
showings.
I'm sure there's a cost for it, but
Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? We haven't looked. But Stacey Ann, I believe, is appearing in person at the first screening of the documentary about her. That would be a treat. The Grammy nominations were announced this week. Lots of LGBTQ nominees and content, but the top, Beyonce is the top nominee with 11 nominations. But close behind are Billie Eilish, who no longer talks about her sexual orientation.
She posted after the election, "It's a war on women." But she's nominated for Record of the Year, Birds of a Feather, as is out Chapel Roan for Good Luck Babe. They're also each nominated for Album of the Year. Eilish for Hit Me Hard and Soft, and Roan for The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess. We will link to a list of all the LGBTQ nominees.
The awards are handed out in February, so you have time to educate yourself on all the nominees and pick your favorites.
How about that Nicole
Scherzinger? I knew you were going to say that. Oh, look, I just read your mind.
Well, she's starring in Sunset Boulevard and is a big hit. She won the Olivier Award for doing it in London.
Mixed reviews here, I would say.
Was considered the front runner for the Tony, but she reposted. Russell Brand has gone over to MAGA.
Yes.
The actor, he's nuts. I mean,
Too bad.
He had a red hat on saying "Make Jesus First Again," and she posted, "Where can I get that hat?" Well, somebody wrote, "Well done, crapping on 90% of your fan base, you predator enabler." She took down the post 24 hours later. She apologized for it because they told her, "This is going to hurt your Tony chances."
Well, evidently she is devout.
She did campaign for Obama in 2008.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been a political statement on her part.
Firmly anti-abortion because her mother was going to have one that didn't. That's how she got born.
So is Sonny Hostin. But it doesn't mean she couldn't be a voter for Democrats. She wanted the hat because it was a religious point that she wanted to make.
Well,
I am really not happy about the debates that are going on within the Democrats about why they lost. And first of all, they won a lot of things, a lot of seats. We talked about it last week. We've talked about it this week. There were a lot of wins in the Democratic column, and
the vote was close, and the national vote is going to be within 2%, as the polls predicted.
So yes, we're
just horrified that people could return the guy who led the insurrection to the White House,
among other things. Well, I'm horrified that we heard all along that Kamala Harris had all these unprecedented numbers of volunteers who were going to go out and knock on doors and make calls, and yet she got 10 million less votes than Biden. But we're going to leave you hanging with that because our show is over. We will see you next week.